Dante Salvator was already done with his wife long before the gala began, but he had not expected to see her in a room built for lies. His offer came later, and it was simple. 30 days under his protection, no questions asked, no doors opened alone. 30 days, one witness, one life kept breathing. What he wanted was her safety, where he could see it. What he promised was that no one would touch her again. Her rules were simpler. She would not belong to him, she would not lie for him, and she would leave the second the danger passed. But before those 30 days were over, neither of them would keep their rules, because Elena Marchetti was not supposed to matter. She was a pastry chef with sugar on her wrists and kindness bad enough to get her killed. He was a married mafia boss who had learned the price of mercy at 18. And on the night his wife told him to choose, he said nothing at all. That was the moment everything chose for us. Chapter 1, the ballroom. The first thing I heard in Dante Salvator's ballroom was the click of onyx beads against bone. Not music, not crystal, not the polite lies of rich people in black silk. Just that dry, measured sound. Click, click, click. I was standing on a ladder, pressing the last sugar orchid into a 7-tier anniversary cake that could have paid my rent for a year. Below me, men in dark suits had gone still in a way that made the room feel colder than the industrial freezer downstairs. No one spoke above a murmur when Dante Salvator entered. They just seemed to tighten around themselves, like the air had been instructed to stand straighter. I did not turn immediately. I should have. Everybody else did. Instead, I finished setting the orchid because hot sugar had a memory for fingerprints, and if I ruined the petal now, Bianca Salvator would notice in under 10 seconds and make me pay for it with the kind of smile women like her used in public. When I climbed down, I finally saw him. He stood near the fountain of champagne under the ballroom's crystal chandeliers, one hand in his pocket, the other turning black rosary beads over his knuckles. He was taller than anyone around him, not because of height alone, but because the room seemed arranged with him as its center. Dark suit, white shirt open at the throat, no tie. His face had that carved, disciplined stillness some men spent their whole lives trying to imitate and never reached. Then I saw the blood on the waiter's cuff. A boy, maybe 19, stood in front of Dante with both hands shaking around a silver tray. One flute lay shattered on the marble. Red wine bled toward the hem of Bianca Salvator's white gown. A guard had the waiter by the arm hard enough to bruise. "Please," the boy whispered. "It slipped." Dante said nothing. The beads clicked once. The guard tightened his grip. The boy gasped. I hated that sound. That small, involuntary sound of someone trying not to cry in public. "Let go of him," I said before I remembered who I was talking to. Half the room turned toward me. My head pastry chef made a noise behind his teeth that sounded like prayer failing. The guard looked offended. Dante looked at me, just looked. His eyes were darker than I expected. Not warm. Not cold either, worse than either. Attentive. "He's bleeding," I said, because apparently I had chosen death by honesty. "Your floor can survive a spill." No one moved. Then the boy swayed, and I saw the real problem. The broken flute had sliced the inside of his wrist. I crossed the ballroom before permission could stop me, caught his hand, and pressed a linen napkin hard against the cut. He flinched. Blood soaked white almost instantly. I kept pressure anyway. "Breathe," I whispered. "Look at me, not them. You're fine. Stay with me." The room had gone so quiet I could hear ice shifting in the champagne buckets. I did not look up, not at Dante. Not at Bianca, not at the armed men pretending to be furniture. The boy mattered more. He was frightened, and fear made people do stupid things with their own blood pressure. "Who are you?" Dante asked. His voice was low enough that everyone had to lean into it. "Elena Marchetti," I said, still pressing the napkin. "And if you want him conscious, tell someone to get a medic instead of making a performance out of this." The beads stopped clicking. I felt rather than saw everyone around him react. Then Dante said, "Marco." A man in a gray suit moved at once. "Yes, boss. Get the doctor." The boy's shoulders loosened by a fraction. Mine did not. Across the room, Bianca Salvetter laughed softly. How moving. She was beautiful in the expensive, polished way magazines called Effortless and everyone else paid for. Diamonds at her throat. Black hair pinned in a sleek knot. Eyes like polished ice. I knew women like Bianca only from a distance. Women who had never burned sugar off their wrists at 2 in the morning. Women who could make cruelty sound cultured. The medic had barely arrived when the first shot broke the glass. Screaming erupted under the chandeliers. Guests dropped. A guard lunged in front of Dante. Someone overturned a table. The sugar swan I had spent 6 hours building exploded across the marble in bright, glittering shards. I pulled the waiter down with me. Another shot cracked. Men shouted in Italian. The sound of it scraped through the ballroom. Hard consonants, fast orders, rage cut into discipline. I smelled gunpowder and buttercream. Down, Marco barked. I was already on the floor, one arm over the boy's shoulders. He was crying now. I did not blame him. Footsteps pounded. Then silence fell too suddenly, the kind that meant the violence had not ended, only changed shape. I lifted my head. Dante stood exactly where he had been before, except now a dead man lay near the west doors and another was on his knees with Marco's gun at the back of his head. Dante hadn't drawn a weapon himself. He didn't need to. He looked at the room and the room arranged its fear around him. His gaze found me. I was kneeling in sugar and blood, still holding pressure on the waiter's wrist. Something unreadable moved across his face. Not softness. He probably did not own any. But something had shifted. Bianca walked toward us over broken crystal as if she had practiced it. Her gown stayed perfect. Of course it did. She stopped in front of Dante, glanced at me, then at the dead man by the door. This is becoming embarrassing. No one answered. Her smile sharpened. Choose me or her. Tonight. I thought I had misheard. The medic was still wrapping the boy's wrist. Guests were pretending not to listen with the force of desperate wealth. And Bianca Salvetter, his wife, I realized with a sick drop in my stomach, had just looked at me as though I were something on the sole of her shoe. I finally stood. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, Bianca said. There hasn't. Dante stayed completely silent. That somehow felt worse than if he had laughed. Bianca held his gaze for one terrible second longer, then turned and drifted away, leaving perfume and threat behind her. I looked at him because I could not help it now. I don't know what she thinks. She thinks correctly, he said. My pulse went wild. I don't even know you. Not yet. Every instinct told me to run. But Marco was blocking the nearest exit, and the doors beyond him had just locked with a heavy mechanical sound that made my skin tighten. I wiped my hands on the ruined napkin. I have to go home. Dante stepped closer. The room changed temperature. Up close, he smelled like expensive cologne layered over cold night air, and something sharper beneath it. Smoke, maybe, or the ghost of gunmetal. His eyes dropped to the blood on my hands, then rose back to my face. You saw too much, he said. I saw a party turn into a crime scene, and my wife speak in public when she should not have. I swallowed. That sounds like a marriage problem. A corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Then he looked at Marco. Take the witnesses. My heart slammed. Witnesses? Guests first, staff second. His gaze returned to me. Her with me. I took a step back. I'm not going anywhere with you. His hand closed around the rosary beads once. Click. No, Dante said calmly. You're not going home tonight, Mercy. The doors shut behind me. Chapter 2. The car smelled like leather, cold rain, and a man who had somewhere more important to be than explaining himself. I sat in the back seat of Dante Salvetter's armored town car with my overnight bag on my lap and enough anger in my chest to keep me warm through winter. Manhattan smeared past the tinted windows in wet gold lines. We had stopped at my apartment under escort, and I had been given 4 minutes to collect clothes, my passport, and the sour little remains of what used to feel like a normal life. I had also been given a bodyguard. I'm Gianni. the man in the front passenger seat said, twisting around to offer me a protein bar as if we were on a school trip. Please don't scream in this car. The boss hates noise, and I'm doing very delicate work with my cortisol levels. I stared at him. He was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and handsome in a way that would have been dangerous if he had not looked faintly offended by existence itself. A pistol sat under his jacket. A bottle of electrolyte water sat in the cup holder beside him. I'm not hungry, I said. That wasn't for hunger. That was for emotional stability. Dante sat beside me, one knee angled toward the door, attention on his phone. The onyx beads rested loose in his left hand. He had not looked at me since we left the ballroom, which somehow made it worse. Take it, Gianni advised. Nobody survives their first night with us on an empty stomach. I did not take it. He sighed tragically and bit into it himself. Dry as plaster. If I die in this family, it won't be bullets. It'll be high protein. I should not have laughed. I did anyway once under my breath. Dante's gaze lifted then. Brief, precise. I looked out the window. You can't keep me, I said after a minute. Dante returned his attention to the phone. I can. That's not the same as should. No, he said. It is. The honesty of that unsettled me more than a lie would have. We drove downtown, past neighborhoods that changed their face block by block. Glass towers, old churches, shuttered bakeries. Restaurants where men smoked outside under awnings and watched expensive cars too carefully. My bakery sat 3 blocks from my apartment. At this hour, the morning staff would be coming in. Luca would be cursing the ovens. Teresa would be humming over the pastry cream. My life had rules I understood. Temperatures, timing, weight, even grief had measurements in a kitchen. This man's world had doors that locked from the outside. What exactly did I see? I asked. That justifies kidnapping, Gianni made a face. We prefer protective relocation. Be quiet, Dante said, with warmth and pleasure. I looked at Dante. Your wife threatened me. He was quiet for a second. Yes. Are you going to explain why? No. The answer hit harder because it came without decoration. I folded my hands tighter over my bag. Then I'll explain something to you. I work 6 days a week. I have rent due Tuesday. I owe my supplier for pistachios, and if I don't show up tomorrow, Chef Bianchi will replace me before lunch. Whatever fantasy your wife is entertaining, I am not part of it. At that, Dante finally put the phone down. Do you think this is about fantasy? There was no anger in his tone. Only a kind of tired attention that made me feel as though I had stepped somewhere deeper than I meant to. I think, I said carefully, you are used to everyone around you pretending your decisions make sense. Gianni put a hand over his heart. I like her. Drive, Dante said to the man behind the wheel. We are driving. The car turned through wrought iron gates into a courtyard paved in black stone. Dante's house rose beyond them, less house than palazzo, old money translated into American ruthlessness. Limestone, iron balconies, dark windows reflecting rain. I had never seen a place like it up close. It looked like the kind of building where people confessed things they did not survive. Inside, the marble was so cold through the soles of my shoes that I felt it in my teeth. A woman in her 60s appeared from a side corridor in a navy dress and sensible shoes, silver hair pulled into a low knot. Rosa, Dante said. She'll stay in the East Suite. Rosa looked from him to me and understood too much too quickly. Have you eaten, child? No, I said. She'll eat, Dante said. I can answer for myself. His gaze slid to mine. Can you? Something stupid and electric moved through me. Not fear, that would have been easier. Rosa ignored both of us. Meyerla kept some soup. Bread too, if Gianni hasn't frightened the kitchen staff with his carb sermons again. From somewhere behind me, Gianni muttered, Bread is betrayal. Rosa swatted his shoulder as she passed. And you are tedious. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Dante heard it. I knew because the beads clicked once in his hand. Rosa led me upstairs. My room was larger than my entire apartment, with cream walls, heavy drapes, and a bed that looked too untouched to belong to anyone real. A small lamp burned near the window. Everything smelled faintly of beeswax and linen. "I'm sorry," Rosa said quietly when Dante remained by the door like a judge. "Truly." That nearly undid me. I set my bag on the bed. "How long?" No one answered at first. Then Dante said, "Until I say otherwise." I turned. "That isn't a time. It's the one that matters." Rosa left us with visible reluctance. I was alone with him then, unless you counted the men outside the door, which I unfortunately did. He stood with one shoulder against the frame, not crowding me, not touching me, and somehow controlling the whole room anyway. "You can call the bakery in the morning," he said. "You can tell them there's a family emergency." "I don't have a family emergency." His eyes lowered to my clenched hands. "You do now." I hated how that landed. Hated more that part of me understood it. "Why did you call me that?" His expression did not change. "What? Mercy." The beads shifted in his hand. Click. "You stopped looking at me the second someone else started bleeding," he said. "No one in my world does that." I swallowed. He had noticed. Of course he had. Men like him noticed everything dangerous. "That doesn't make me yours to rename." Something flickered low in his face then. Approval, irritation. God, I didn't know. "It makes you memorable," he said. I should have answered sharply. I should have told him I did not want to be memorable to him. Instead, I asked the wrong question. "Is your wife coming here?" "No." The word came fast, final. For the first time since the ballroom, I understood something simple and cold. Whatever existed between Dante and Bianca Salvetor, it was not marriage in any ordinary sense. He turned to leave. "At least tell me the rules," I said. He paused. "No open windows after dark. No phone calls I don't know about. No wandering past the chapel wing. If Gianni tells you to get down, you get down. If I tell you to stay near me, you stay near me." I stared at him. "And if I do," he looked back over his shoulder, "then I'll carry you." The door closed softly behind him. That was somehow worse. Chapter 3. The kitchen light. I woke to the smell of espresso and butter. For one blessed second, I thought I was in my apartment over the bakery, late for morning prep, and about to hear Lucas swearing at laminated dough. Then I opened my eyes to a ceiling, painted with faded cherubs, and remembered exactly where I was. The East Suite's windows looked over the inner courtyard. Men in black coats moved below with discreet weapons and discreet impatience. Somewhere in the house, a door shut, heavy enough that I felt it through the floorboards. Mafia houses, I learned quickly, had their own weather. Rosa found me half-dressed and suspicious in the hallway and walked me down to the kitchen as if escorting a nervous relative through church. The kitchen itself was enormous, old copper pans hanging above a butcher block island scarred by years of use. This, finally, was a room I understood. Myrla, the cook Gianni was clearly in love with and clearly terrifying to him, handed me a demi-tasse without asking questions. "Drink," she said. "You look like bad pastry." I liked her immediately. By the time I finished the espresso, my hands had stopped shaking enough for me to notice the ingredients laid out near the far counter. Flour, eggs, blood oranges, bitter chocolate, cream. I turned to Rosa. "Who's baking?" She gave me a look over her glasses. "You are, if you want to keep from climbing the walls." That was how Dante Salvetor discovered I told the truth with dessert. He came in 20 minutes later, coat off, sleeves rolled once, talking quietly in Italian with Marco Ferrante, the head of security. Marco was lean, weathered, and carried himself like a man whose kindness had never interfered with his job. He had brought me a fresh phone earlier and told me, almost apologetically, that outgoing calls would be monitored. I hated that I believed he was sorry. Dante stopped when he saw me tempering chocolate at the counter. "You let her near knives?" he asked Rosa. "She's making mousse, not mutiny," Rosa said. Gianni wandered in behind them, carrying a boiled egg, and looked at my mixing bowl as though it had insulted his blood work. "This house is a war on my physique," Myrla, without turning, said. "Then die thinner." He clutched his chest. "One day you'll mourn me." "One day," she said dryly, "I'll season your funeral potatoes." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Failed. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. He crossed to the counter. What is it? I looked at the half-finished dessert, then at him. A layered tort. That wasn't the question. No, it was. I set down the spatula. Bottom layer is bitter chocolate with espresso. Middle is blood orange cream. Top is sponge sugar. Gianni peered closer. That sounds emotional. It sounds expensive, Marco said. I met Dante's eyes. It looks strong when you see it whole, but the most fragile part is hidden in the middle. One crack in the shell and everything underneath collapses. Silence settled around the island. Gianni leaned back slowly. Definitely emotional. I wanted to disappear. Instead, Dante said, "Finish it." And I did. That should have been the strangest part of the morning. It was. The strangest part was how easily my body remembered itself in that kitchen. Sugar temperature. Orange zest under my nails. The relief of making something precise with my hands when nothing else in my life still obeyed measurement, even under guard, even in a criminal's house. Maybe especially there. Around noon, Marco brought in a box from my bakery, my knives, notebooks, and a spare apron. Chef Bianchi had sent them without comment. That hurt more than anger would have. He replaced me already, I said. Rosa touched my shoulder. I'm sorry. I nodded because if I spoke, I would embarrass myself. When Marco left, Dante remained by the doorway, watching. You can work here, he said. That isn't the point. No, he said, it is. I should have looked away, I didn't. There was a small scar at the base of his throat I had not noticed before, pale against olive skin, disappearing under his shirt collar. Not a recent wound, an old one. The kind a body kept long after everyone else stopped asking. What did Bianca think I saw? I asked. He went still in a way I was beginning to fear. Why do you think it was about what you saw? Because women like her don't humiliate themselves over nothing. A beat passed. Then he said, good. I frowned. Good, you notice structure. That sounds like a compliment. It's a survival skill. Before I could answer, the chapel bells rang from somewhere deeper in the house, just a single low note. Dante's hand closed around the rosary beads so hard I heard them knock against one another. Click, not measured this time, abrupt. He left the room without a word. Marco followed. Gianni crossed himself with the air of a man hedging bets. I stared after Dante, flour on my fingers, heart beating too fast for reasons I did not trust. That afternoon, I tried my phone. 3 messages from Teresa, 2 from my landlord, 1 from my father that I did not open. At dusk, Marco found me in the library pretending to read and warned me not to go near the West Terrace. Sight line problem, he said. Do you ever say anything that doesn't sound like it belongs in a police report? A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Rarely, he hesitated, then added, the boss isn't keeping you here for sport. That is not reassuring. No, Marco said. I suppose it is. Later, when the house had gone into that peculiar armed quiet again, I went back to the kitchen for water and found Dante there alone. Standing in the dark, by the counter where my tort sat under a glass dome. He had cut 1 slice. He had not touched it. I stopped in the doorway. If you don't like blood orange, just say so. He turned. Moonlight from the courtyard silvered the line of his jaw. The beads hung loose from his hand now. He looked less like a king in that light, and more like a man standing guard over something no one else could see. He took 1 bite while holding my gaze. It should not have felt intimate. It did. How is it? I asked. Honest. I did not know what to do with that. Neither of us moved. For 1 suspended second, I thought he might step closer. Thought I might forget to breathe if he did. Instead, a phone rang somewhere down the hall. The moment broke cleanly in half. Dante looked at the screen, then at me. For the first time, I saw something close to anger sharpen his face. Go upstairs, Mercy. Why? Because someone just tried to access the east gates with your name. Dante, she made desserts the way other people left confessions behind carelessly. As if no one would know how much they gave away. And when the bells rang, she watched my hand close over Lucia's beads with those open, dangerous eyes. I should have sent her far from me the first night. Instead, I was standing in the dark eating blood, orange off a silver fork, and thinking about the moment she knelt in blood for a boy who could do nothing for her. Word count, 896. Chapter 4. The chapel door. The chapel smelled like wax, stone, and old grief. I did not mean to find it. I had meant to find Rosa, or coffee. Or a hallway in this ridiculous house that did not end in a locked door or a man with a gun pretending not to follow me. Instead, I turned the wrong corner after sunrise and stepped through a half-open oak door into a private chapel with black marble floors and votive candles flickering under a painted Virgin. I stopped because Dante was there. He stood in the front pew with his back to me, head bowed slightly, rosary beads looped through one hand. No jacket, white shirt, holster at his spine. The room made him look less terrifying somehow, which was unfair. Men like him should not be improved by candlelight. I should have backed out. A floorboard betrayed me. Dante turned. For one strange second, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I told you not to wander. I told you houses this large should come with maps." He looked almost irritated by the answer. Good. I crossed my arms and noticed the framed photograph beside the altar. A dark-haired girl of about 11 in a blue dress, smiling with her front teeth slightly crooked. Something in the room shifted. "Who is she?" I asked before tact could save me. His jaw tightened once. "My sister." No speech followed, no polished explanation, just those two words set down like weight. I glanced at the beads in his hand. Black onyx worn smooth. Child-sized once, maybe. My throat tightened. The silence between us changed shape. Then the chapel doors burst inward. Marco came in first, weapon drawn, Gianni behind him breathing hard and holding a paper cup. "Good news," he announced. "I saved the coffee." "Bad news?" I asked. "Someone shot at your bedroom window." My stomach dropped. Marco's face was grim. Long lens from the opposite roof, glass only. No entry. Dante moved then, fast enough that the candles seemed to lean away from him. He caught my elbow, turned me toward the back sacristy, and put himself between me and the open doors in one clean motion. The touch lasted maybe 2 seconds. My whole body noticed. His hand was warm. Steady, barely firm enough to guide. I hated how much steadiness could feel like something else. "Boss," Gianni said, taking in Dante's hold on me with a kind of theatrical despair. "If we're relocating again, I'd like to note I haven't finished my macros for the day." Marco looked at him. "You think in bullets and protein. I contain multitudes." Dante did not release my arm until Marco had cleared the corridor. When he finally let go, the place where his fingers had been felt absurdly awake. "That's twice in 2 days," I said. "Yes, then stop treating me like I'm overreacting." He looked at me properly then. "I haven't." I opened my mouth and shut it again, because he was right. He had been controlling, infuriating. Secretive, but never dismissive. Gianni drank his coffee with the solemnity of a doomed saint. "For the record, Meyerla says if I get shot before lunch she's not making a separate tray for the funeral. Says one lasagna serves all." Despite everything, I laughed. Dante's gaze flicked to my face at the sound. It should not have mattered. It did. Marco returned a minute later. "South wing secure. We found the shell casing." Dante nodded once. "Double the roof rotation." He started to walk out. I heard myself say, "Wait." He turned back. "The title scene," I said softly, because once a thought began with him, it rarely ended where I intended. "Your wife. That line, choose me or her." "Why didn't you answer?" Gianni, for once, had the sense to vanish with Marco. We were alone in the candlelight. Dante's expression did not move. "Because Bianca wanted me to say your name in public." Understanding came ugly and late. "She wanted to mark me." "Yes." A chill moved under my skin. "And if you had chosen her, she would still have come for you, just slower." I stared at him. "Then why am I still here?" Because I should have gone cold with fear. I did a little. But underneath, it was something far more troubling. A quiet, sharp awareness that his silence had not been indifference. It had been protection. Dante said, because you saw her speak to the dead man before the shooting. I searched my memory. Champagne, music, the silver of Bianca's bracelet as she leaned near the west doors. A whisper I hadn't listened to, because I was fixing sugar orchids. She knows I saw that. She suspects. And you're just telling me this now. If I told you everything at once, Mercy, you'd bolt. He said the nickname like a fact this time, not mockery. Somehow that was worse. And maybe I should. A pulse moved in his jaw. Maybe. The answer hit harder than any command would have. Then he stepped forward, not enough to touch. Enough to unsteady the room. I married Bianca to stop a war 5 years ago, he said. She has not lived in this house in 18 months. There are things she wants from me I will not give. Public obedience is one of them. You talk about marriage like an arms deal. That is what it was. I looked at the photograph again, the girl, the beads. The man standing in a private chapel with a gun at his back and a wound in his face he would never name unless forced. What happened to your sister? I asked. His eyes darkened, and for one terrible moment I thought I had pushed too hard. Instead he said, a lesson someone taught my family. Nothing more. That was all he would give. Yet it landed with more force than 10 pages of confession. From the corridor, Gianni called, if everyone is done having devastating revelations, I have egg whites turning tragic in the kitchen. The corner of my mouth betrayed me again. Dante noticed. Of course, he moved past me toward the door. As he did, his sleeve brushed my wrist. A small accidental contact. Bare skin to cotton, it should have meant nothing. My body did not agree. He paused with his hand on the chapel door. Stay away from the east windows tonight. Are you asking or ordering? He looked back. I stopped asking when the second bullet came. And just like that, tenderness disappeared back under the surface where he kept all the dangerous things. Word count, 882, Chapter 5, the bitter almond the poison smelled like marzipan. That was the first thought I had, which was ridiculous under the circumstances, but true. The second thought was that I hated how my life had become a place where noticing the scent of bitter almond in a silver coffee service counted as useful. It happened at dinner. Not Bianca's kind of dinner with ambassadors, diamonds, and public knives hidden in smiles. This was quieter. Dante at the head of a long walnut table, Rosa at the sideboard. Marco reviewing schedules between bites. Gianni mourning the existence of breadsticks while eating 3 of them out of spite. I'm not weak, he informed no one. I'm strategic. You're noisy, Myrla said, passing with a tray. I should have been comforted by the ordinary rhythm of them. Instead, the ordinary parts made the danger worse. People could get used to anything. That frightened me. Dante had just lifted his espresso when the scent hit me. Almond. Wrong. Sharp under the roast, I moved before I thought. Don't! Every head turned. Dante's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. I crossed the room, took the cup from him, and brought it to my nose. The sweetness beneath the coffee was faint, but it was there. Too clean, too bitter. That isn't amaretto, I said. Marco was already on his feet. Gianni dropped the breadstick. Rosa went pale. I poured that myself. I know. I set the cup down carefully. This wasn't the bottle in the kitchen, it's something else. Dante's eyes never left my face. Cyanide. I don't know enough to swear it. My voice shook once and I hated it. But I know what bitter almond extract smells like, and I know when something is pretending to be it. The room changed instantly. Chairs scraped. Marco called orders into his earpiece. Gianni was out the door with impossible speed for a man who complained that much about carbohydrates. Dante stood. In that second, I saw the whole structure of him harden, not loud, not theatrical. Just absolute. Lock the staff wing, he told Marco. No one leaves. Rosa looked wounded, not offended, wounded. You think one of us? I think someone entered my house, Dante said. His tone gentled by a fraction when he turned to her. That is not the same thing. She nodded, but grief moved across her face anyway. He looked back at me. How did you know? My mother used to flavor wedding cake filling with almond oil. We could never afford real marzipan, so I learned the cheap versions by smell. I swallowed. You don't forget the wrong thing when you've spent your life measuring what belongs. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. Later, when the house was being searched room by room, and no one trusted the hallway shadows, Dante found me in the kitchen, washing the same spoon 3 times, because my hands would not stay still unless they were doing something. You saved my life, he said. I kept my eyes on the sink. I identified a smell. You moved before anyone else. Someone had too. Water ran hot over my fingers. I shut it off. He stood behind me, not touching, close enough that I could feel his heat anyway. The kitchen lights were low. Outside, rain tapped the window panes like fingernails. There's something you haven't told me, he said. I closed my eyes. Of course there was. There had always been. My father owes money, I said. Silence. I forced the words out before courage failed. Not to you, to the Viscardis, Bianca's family. He used my name twice on catering invoices years ago, took advances, disappeared, and left me to clean it up. That charity gala job. I didn't get it because Bianca liked my work. I got it because she knew exactly who I was. Dante said nothing. I laughed once, sharp and miserable. There, that look on your face. That's why I didn't tell you. What look? The one where I become explainable. He turned me then, one hand at my elbow, not rough, not kind enough to survive. You were explainable the night I met you, he said. That doesn't mean you were safe. I looked up at him and made the mistake of staying there. The room got smaller. Did Bianca hire me on purpose? Yes, to punish my father, partly, and the rest, his jaw shifted once, to see whether I noticed you. I stopped breathing for a second. Somewhere down the hall, Gianni yelled, If anyone poisons me, just know I had dreams. Myrla yelled back. Your dream was visible abs. It still counts. The absurdity of it should have broken the moment. It didn't. It only made the quiet between Dante and me feel more private. My voice came out softer than I meant. Did you notice you? I nodded. His thumb flexed once against my sleeve, the smallest betrayal of composure I had seen from him. Yes, I should have stepped away. I didn't. That was my mistake. Small, invisible, real. His gaze dropped to my mouth and held there just long enough to burn. Then he released my arm and stepped back as if distance cost him something. Restraint looked cruel on him. Get some sleep, he said. You almost kissed me. His eyes lifted slowly to mine. No, he said. It was the calmest lie I had ever heard. After he left, I stood alone in the kitchen with the scent of bitter almond still in the air and understood something I had not wanted to admit. By then, I was no longer afraid of him most of the time. I was afraid of myself around him. Word count, 886. Chapter 6, the safe room. The ambush came at dusk, under a sky the color of bruised steel. Dante had decided the main house was too visible after the poison. He moved me to a smaller property on the Hudson used, according to Gianni, for strategic sulking and seasonal violence. It was a stone house wrapped in bare trees, with a private dock. Reinforced windows, and a kitchen less grand but more human. Rosa came. Marco came. Gianni came with an insulated bag full of protein snacks and one concealed bag of pastries he insisted were for morale, not weakness. The road should have been clean. It was. Our lead SUV blew a tire first, not a puncture, a shot. Then the second shot took the side mirror off our car and everything happened at once. Down, Gianni barked. I was already moving, flattening into the seat as Dante shoved me lower with one hand and drew with the other. Glass starred, but did not break. Marco's voice cracked through the radio. Men answered in clipped Italian. The engine screamed. The smell of burned rubber filled the car. Another bullet struck metal. Dante had one arm braced over me, his body turned toward the window. The rosary beads were wrapped around his wrist, now beneath the grip of the gun. He fired twice without visible effort. The return fire stopped. Not the danger, just the part of it that made sound. We reached the house in a blur of gravel and shouted orders. Dante pulled me through the side entrance, down a narrow hall, and into a reinforced pantry hidden behind a false shelving wall. Safe room, I realized dimly, because apparently rich criminals stored emergency women beside canned tomatoes and shotguns. My breathing was ragged. My hands shook so hard I had to clasp them together. Dante crouched in front of me. "Are you hit?" "No, look at me." I did. His face had gone harder than I had ever seen it. Not wild, that was the terrible part. Total control could be more frightening than rage. A line of blood ran from his temple into his collar. "You're bleeding." "It isn't mine." That should not have relieved me. It did. The gunfire outside had moved farther from the house. Closer again, then farther. I pressed a hand to my mouth. "How many times does this happen?" He did not pretend not to understand. "Enough. And you live like this?" "Yes." Something in me cracked then, not from fear exactly, but from finally seeing the full scale of him. Not the expensive suits, not the silent rooms. This. The machinery of danger that followed him like weather. Men bleeding in trees because they wanted him dead. Doors hidden behind pantry shelves. The plain acceptance in his voice. I reached for the dish towel on a hook beside me and held it out. "Your head." He stared at it for half a second, as if no one had ever offered him anything so ordinary in the middle of blood. Then he took it. No, not took. He let me do it. I stepped closer, lifted the towel, and pressed it gently to his temple. His breath changed. Barely, but I felt it. "You should stop shaking," he said quietly. "I'm working on it." A corner of his mouth almost moved. The room was too small for him, too small for me. Too small for the fact that I could feel the heat of his body through my coat, and did not want a Chapter 7 the river house. The gunfire ended by degrees. First the hard snapping from the trees. Then the shouted Italian. Then only the river beyond the stone walls, black and patient under the dusk. I was still in the safe room with Dante when Marco knocked twice on the hidden panel and said, "Clear." Dante did not move immediately. Neither did I. The dish towel at his temple had gone pink where I held it. His gun rested low at his side now, but not away. Men like him did not relax. They only changed the shape of their readiness. "You can let go," he said. I looked down and realized my left hand was twisted in the front of his shirt. I let go as if the fabric had burned me. "Right," I said. "Good, excellent." Nobody died in a pantry. Wonderful. That almost got a smile out of him. Almost. He opened the panel and led me out into a house that smelled like spent powder and lemon polish. Gianni was in the hallway arguing with a medic while holding an ice pack to his shoulder. "It grazed me," he said tragically. "A very handsome graze, but still." Myrla better hear about this and regret everything she's ever said to me. From the kitchen doorway, Myrla said, "I regret not aiming higher when I met you. You see," Gianni pressed a hand to his chest. "This is an abusive environment for recovery. It should not have steadied me. It did." Rosa came toward me fast enough to break all her usual dignity and touched my face with both hands as if confirming I was real. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Then sit down before you fall down." I obeyed because my knees had started having opinions. The kitchen at the river house was warmer than the one in Manhattan, smaller too, with dark wooden shelves and copper pans that looked actually used. Someone had put a kettle on. Someone else had blood on the floor near the back entrance. Marco stepped over it while talking into his radio as if both things belonged. Dante stood at the far counter while a medic cleaned the cut on his temple. He watched me the whole time. That should have annoyed me. Instead, it made breathing easier. "What now?" I asked. Marco answered before Dante could. "Now we find out who knew the route." Dante's gaze did not leave mine. "Very few people." A quiet settled over the room. I understood then what everyone else already had. This was not just another attack. This was a map from the inside. Rosa handed me tea I did not remember asking for. I wrapped both hands around the mug anyway. Gianni lowered himself into a chair with the sound of a man personally betrayed by furniture. "If the traitor turns out to be one of the men who meal prep plain chicken in my gym fridge, I will take it very badly." "No one is interested in your fridge," Marco said. You say that because you've never loved anything. False, I love silence, Dante finally spoke. Enough, not loudly, everything still obeyed. He dismissed half the room with a look, and the other half with 2 words. Within minutes, it was only Rosa at the stove, Marco somewhere outside checking perimeter rotations, and Dante standing across from me with fresh gauze at his temple, and Lucia's beads wound once around his hand. Click, the sound was back to measured. That frightened me more than the bullets had. How long? I asked. He understood at once. 30 days. I stared at him. What? 30 days under my protection, he said. No doors opened alone, no unscreened calls, no leaving without me or Marco. After that, if the threat is contained, you walk away. The number sat between us like another kind of weapon. 30 days, I repeated. You say that as if it's reasonable. It's what I can promise. Rosa set a plate in front of me, bread, cheese, soup. I looked at Dante. And if I refuse, you already did, he said. Several times. That would have been funny if it were not my life. And yet here I am. Yes. I hated how calm he was, hated more that some broken part of me was beginning to rely on it. Rosa muttered something about stubborn men and took herself upstairs with deliberate tact. The house quieted. Rain started again against the kitchen windows. Dante came around the counter and stopped close enough that I could smell cold air on him, river water, the metallic edge of violence not quite washed off. He reached out, slow enough for me to move if I wanted. I didn't. His fingers brushed a streak of dried blood from my wrist. Not yours, he asked. No, his thumb paused there for one dangerous second. No one touches you again, he said. It was not romantic when he said it. It was worse. It sounded like a vow he would keep with bodies. I looked up before I could stop myself. You can't promise that. I can promise what happens after. Something electric moved through me. Fear, anger, relief, want. I could no longer tell them apart when he stood that close. From somewhere down the hall, Gianni shouted, If anyone's having a meaningful stare, please do it away from the soup. Some of us are suffering visibly. Dante's hand fell away. The room took a breath again. He stepped back first. Of course he did. Restraint fit him like a tailored sin. Eat, he said. And because I had survived the road, and the hidden room, and the way his voice went dark when he made promises, I picked up the spoon with hands that still shook and did exactly that. Later that night, unable to sleep, I crossed the upstairs hall for water and found the study door open. Dante stood inside by the desk with Marco and another man I had only seen once before at the gala. Elegant, silver at the temples, beautiful in the cold way expensive knives were beautiful. Vittorio Greco, Dante's cousin, his most trusted advisor, they did not see me at first. Vittorio leaned over the map spread on the desk and said softly, Someone wanted the girl frightened, not dead. Dead is easier. The words were ordinary, the tone was not, smooth, cultured, mild. And beneath it, something in me recoiled. Because that was how Bianca Salvator had sounded at the gala before the first bullet broke glass. I stepped back before the floorboard could betray me. The beads clicked once from inside the study. I went to my room with the taste of fear sharp as coins at the back of my tongue and did not sleep at all. Chapter 8, the wife Bianca arrived at noon wearing winter white and a face designed for war. The River House had spent the morning pretending to be peaceful. Rosa made lunch. Meyerla bullied the local butcher over the phone. Gianni announced that a shoulder graze had made him spiritually more interesting. Marco checked windows, checked roofs, checked exits, checked them all again. Then 3 black cars turned through the gates, and the atmosphere inside the house changed so completely the silverware seemed to tense. I was in the kitchen glazing lemon cakes when Rosa came in and said, Do not start anything. That sounds like advice for Gianni. It is, she said. But it applies to you. Bianca entered before I could answer. She did not look at the cakes. She looked at me. There are beautiful women, and there are women who understand beauty as strategy. Bianca Salvator belonged to the second kind. Cream wool coat, diamond studs, gloves the color of bone, the kind of stillness that came from never hurrying toward what would come to her anyway. "Miss Marchetti," she said. I set down the spoon. "Mrs. Salvator." Temporarily, I blinked once. Bianca's mouth curved very slightly. "Good. You do have a pulse." "Bianca," Dante said from the doorway. He had come in so quietly I hadn't heard him. Her eyes went to him and changed by half a shade, not softening, sharpening differently. "Dante." He did not approach her. He did not kiss her. He did not do anything a husband was meant to do in a room with his wife. That told me more than any confession could have. "You weren't invited," he said. And yet I continue to arrive. Gianni drifted through behind Dante, carrying a tray of glasses, and murmured to me, "If I die today." "Tell Myrla I was radiant under pressure." "You are pressure," I whispered. He looked wounded, cruel but fair. Bianca removed one glove finger by finger. "I came because your silence has become inefficient." Dante's expression did not move. "Then be efficient." Her gaze slid to me. "She saw me at the West Doors with Paolo Ventresca before he died." There it was, the thing none of them had said aloud. My skin went cold. I remembered a flash of silver bracelet, a man leaning in, Bianca speaking low enough to be missed if anyone had been watching the powerful instead of the dying. "You knew," I said. "Of course I knew," Bianca replied. "I was the one speaking. Why speak to him at all? Because I was telling him to leave." Dante said. "Bianca." "No," her attention stayed on me. "You deserve at least one truth in this family. Paolo had been bought, not by me. I told him to walk out while he still had feet to do it with." I laughed once in disbelief. "That's your defense." "My defense," Bianca said softly, "is that if I'd wanted you dead, pastry chef, you would not have made it to the parking lot." The kitchen went still around us. Rosa shut the oven with unnecessary force. Gianni muttered, "I miss when my biggest problem was quinoa." I looked at Bianca. "Then why the ultimatum?" For the first time, something real moved under her perfect face. Not love, not jealousy either. Fear. "Because Vittorio was watching," she said. Dante went utterly still. Bianca turned to him at last. "Did you think I did not know? He's been testing the edges for months. He wanted you to name the girl in public. He wanted to see if she mattered enough to pull you off balance. And you played along," Dante said. "I bought her time." The words landed hard enough to change the air in my lungs. Bianca looked back at me. "You think I wanted your life because he looked at you. Don't flatter either of us." I wanted to know why a woman with sugar on her wrists made men with guns rearrange their stance. I should have hated her. Part of me still did. The rest understood her too suddenly. She had lived in this world longer than I had, long enough to know which silences meant danger. "Why not tell him directly?" I asked. A humorless smile touched her mouth. "Because Dante trusts loyalty after it has already bled for him, and Vittorio has been bleeding for the right side in public for years." Dante's hand closed around the beads. Click, hard. Bianca saw it. So did I. She reached into her bag and set a small brass key on the counter. "Paolo left a locker at Grand Central under a false name. My people couldn't open it without drawing notice." "Yours can." Her gaze stayed on Dante. "If there's anything left inside, it may tell you what he was carrying that got him killed." "Why give it to me now?" Dante asked. "Because the poison failed," Bianca said. "And if Vittorio's moved from testing to panic, then we're all late already." Rosa made a small sign of the cross under her breath. Bianca picked up one of the lemon cakes, looked at it, and set it down untouched. "For what it's worth, Miss Marchetti, I did not ask him to choose because I wanted him. I asked because I wanted a room full of predators listening to the answer." My throat tightened, because suddenly that night in the ballroom looked different from the angle of survival. Dante said nothing. Of course he didn't. Bianca looked at him one last time. "If you keep hesitating, cousin, he will take from you exactly what he took before." Then she turned and left the kitchen as elegantly as if she had not just split the foundation under the house. When the cars were gone, no one spoke for a while. Gianni finally cleared his throat. "On the bright side, the lemon glaze set beautifully through all of that. No one looked at him. He sighed. I contribute in texture. Dante picked up the brass key. His gaze found mine over the cold shine of metal. You're not leaving my sight tonight, he said. And because Bianca's fear had looked too much like the truth, I did not argue. Chapter 9, the chapel ledger. The chapel at the River House was smaller than the one in Manhattan. Simpler, too. No painted saints, no black marble, just whitewashed walls, a narrow altar, and a red sanctuary lamp burning like a held breath in the corner. I found it after midnight because sleep had become a rumor. Dante had gone with Marco to open Paolo Ventresca's locker. Gianni was on active recovery, which appeared to mean eating contraband biscotti while claiming it was tactical. Rosa had long since gone to bed. The house settled into that armed silence I was beginning to recognize as its natural state. I lit 2 votive candles and sat in the last pew with my coat around my shoulders and my thoughts behaving badly. Bianca's words would not leave me alone. If you keep hesitating, he will take from you exactly what he took before. I did not know whether she meant Lucia or something worse. My fingers found the underside of the pew because I needed something to do with them. Wood, dust, a nick in the varnish, then metal. I frowned and reached farther. There was a small latch hidden beneath the seat. The compartment inside held a folded prayer card, a packet of old photographs tied with black ribbon, and a leather notebook thin enough to miss unless you knew to look. I should have put it back. I opened it instead. The first pages were household donations, chapel repairs, mundane entries in 2 distinct hands. Rosa's rounded script in places, a tighter, more elegant hand in others, dates. Amounts, names, then older pages, much older before the ink changed, a list of routes, church, vestibule, East Alley, town car, alternate driver unavailable. My pulse stumbled. The page was dated 17 years ago, and at the bottom, in the elegant hand I had already seen elsewhere in the book, were initials. VG. The chapel door opened behind me. I rose too fast, notebook in hand. Dante stopped on the threshold, winter air still clinging to his coat. Marco remained outside and after one look at my face, shut the door behind him. Dante took in the candles, the open compartment, the leather book. Then he looked at me and knew something had changed. What did you find? I held the notebook out. Tell me Vittorio didn't organize Lucia's church route. He did not take the book. For one suspended second, he did not move at all. Then the beads clicked once, very softly, as if the sound itself had gone numb. Where was that? Under the pew. He crossed the chapel and took the notebook from my hand with care so controlled it hurt to watch. He looked at the page, looked at the initials, looked away. When he spoke, his voice had gone flat enough to scare me. He handled family logistics when he was 26, and Lucia died on a route he handled. Yes, I swallowed. Did you know? No. He said it like a sentence passed on himself. I should have let it rest. Instead, I asked, what happened that day? Dante stood with the notebook open and the red lamp painting a line of blood across one side of his face. I left her. Only that. I waited. He exhaled once, slow. My father was meeting someone behind the church. There was shouting in the alley. I told Lucia to stay in the vestibule and not move. His fingers tightened on the worn leather. I was gone 7 minutes. The silence after that was not empty. It was full of everything he had never buried. When I came back, he said, there was no vestibule left. Pain moved through me so hard it felt like impact. Dante, no. His eyes lifted to mine, dark and terrible in the candlelight. Don't make that kind, not unless you're willing to carry it. I thought of my mother on the bakery floor. My father shouting, wait, 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 and my own hands obeying panic instead of instinct. So I told him the truth because lying in a chapel felt like inviting lightning. My mother stopped breathing 6 feet from the prep table, I said. My father said not to call yet because he didn't want an ambulance bill if she came around. My throat tightened once, and I forced it open again. I listened. By the time I didn't, she was gone. For a moment, all we did was look at each other across the narrow aisle between pews. His guilt, mine, Two different disasters wearing human skin. Then Dante set the notebook on the altar as if it might explode, and came toward me with the dangerous slowness he used, when violence was one option, and restraint the one he hated. His hand rose to my face, paused. I leaned into it before pride could save me. That was the mistake, or the mercy. His palm settled against my cheek, warm and rough and impossibly careful. He looked at me like a man standing too close to a cliff edge he had chosen himself. "You move toward the wounded," he said quietly. "You count exits while pretending not to." A breath of something not quite laughter touched his mouth. Then he bent his head and kissed me, not hard, worse, slow enough for refusal. Controlled enough to feel like hunger held under lock. His other hand never touched me. His body never crowded mine. It was only his mouth, his thumb at my cheekbone, and the terrible restraint of a man who knew exactly how much he wanted and hated himself for wanting it where grief still lived. When he drew back, I was breathing like I had run. He looked about half a second from doing something unforgivable. Instead, he stepped away first. Of course he did. The red lamp burned between us. On the altar, the leather notebook lay open to a root written in Vittorio's hand. And in that chapel, with Lucia's ghost and my mother's silence watching from whatever place the dead kept their patience, I understood that desire was not the opposite of danger. Sometimes it was how danger recognized you. Chapter 10, the bakery window. Dante took me back to my bakery under armed escort and called it a controlled appearance. I called it insanity. "Routine can keep rumors down," Marco said from the front seat. "Routine can also get me shot through a croissant display." "True," Gianni said. "But at least you'd die among laminated excellence." I stared at the back of his head. "Why are you like this?" He considered that. "Calcium deficiency, emotional neglect." "Excellent hair." The bakery looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had changed scale. The green awning on Mulberry Street still sagged at one corner. The window still displayed Sfogliatelle, no one in this neighborhood appreciated enough. Inside, the bell above the door rang exactly the same as it always had. For one blinding second, it hurt. Teresa dropped a tray. "Madonna!" Luca swore so hard Rosa would have crossed herself on instinct. Then everyone talked at once. I got hugged by Teresa, glared at by Luca, nearly cried over the smell of orange zest and espresso, and discovered that armed men in dark coats looked even stranger beside a pastry case than they did in ballrooms. Dante stayed near the door. Of course he did. He had come in a charcoal overcoat and no visible weapon, which on him somehow looked more dangerous than a gun. Customers entered, saw him, and abruptly remembered errands elsewhere. Gianni stationed himself by the biscotti with a level of reverence I had never once seen him show to authority. "Touch nothing," Meyerla had warned him before we left. He immediately touched 3 things and called it surveillance. For almost 20 minutes, life pretended. I tied on my old apron. I checked the proofing box. I corrected Luca's sugar ratio on principle. Teresa cried once in the walk-in and denied it with conviction. Even Marco softened by a fraction while pretending to study the espresso machine like it might confess. Then the bell over the door rang again. Vittorio Greco entered smiling. I knew him well enough now to understand that his elegance was not ease. It was arrangement, silver at his temples, camel coat, gloves. A face built to earn trust in rooms where no one should have given it. "Miss Marchetti," he said warmly, "how good to see you restored to us." Every nerve in my body woke up wrong. He kissed the air beside my cheek. The scent that followed him was expensive, restrained, and threaded with something sweet under the bergamot. Bitter almond. So faint most people would miss it. I didn't. My spine went cold. Dante saw something change in my face and came closer at once. "Vittorio! Cousin!" The word wore silk over knives. Vittorio glanced toward the pastry case. "I hear she saved your life twice in 1 week. You always did have a talent for improbable attachments." Dante's expression did not move. "State your purpose." How ungenerous. "I came to pay my respects to the brave girl everyone is trying to murder." Gianni muttered from the biscotti. See, and people say romance is dead. No one acknowledged him. Vittorio looked at me again. Do you remember the gala, Miss Marchetti? My heart hit hard once, because his tone was mild, cultured, almost absent. The exact tone from Dante's study that night. The exact tone Bianca had been imitating when she warned us. I said carefully, I remember enough. I imagine it was upsetting. Not as upsetting as you seem to hope. The corner of his mouth lifted. Then his gaze dropped to the tray on the counter where I had just set down bitter almond amaretti for the lunch rush. And I knew, not because of the almond alone, because he smiled. A private, satisfied little curve, as if the joke belonged to him. The poisoned espresso. Bitter almond pretending to be flavor. A killer too elegant to use mess when subtlety would wound longer. He saw me understand. That was the worst part, a beat past. Then Vittorio said softly, Careful, little Mercy. In this city, people disappear for less than a look. Dante moved before the last word finished leaving Vittorio's mouth. His hand caught Vittorio by the throat and drove him back against the wall between the cannoli shelf and the refrigerator so hard the glass rattled. Teresa screamed. Luca ducked. Marco had his gun out. Gianni somehow ended up shielding the eclairs with his own body. I will not lose the hazelnut glaze to family politics. Vittorio did not fight the chokehold. That made it worse. He only looked at Dante with bright, measured eyes and said, even with fingers at his throat, Ah, there she is. Dante's voice dropped low enough to flay. You say her name again and I'll pull out your tongue. Mercy. He had not said Alina, not pastry chef, not girl, my nickname. The name only Dante used. He knew, he had known. Marco stepped in. Boss! Dante held 1 second longer. 2. Then let go. Vittorio smoothed his coat as if being nearly strangled beside a Napoleon's tray were a social inconvenience. He looked at me once, and what lived beneath his smile showed plainly now. He enjoyed fear. That made 2 of us. Only I hated it. He left the bakery with his gloves untouched and his composure immaculate. The bell rang behind him. No one moved. Then Dante turned to me. What did you smell? Almond, I said, on him. Same undernote as the espresso, and he wasn't surprised by the word mercy. Marco swore softly. Gianni looked at the door, then at Dante. That feels bad. Profound, Marco said. I'm wounded, and still I offer insight. Dante's eyes stayed on mine. We're done pretending. He took my apron off me himself, untying the bow at my back with hands that were too steady for the fury in his face. Then he said the words that changed the day. Get her out, now! Chapter 11, the necessary lesson Vittorio took me anyway, not from the street. That would have been simple. He took me from the space between one heartbeat and the next. We had made it back to Manhattan by dark. Dante wanted the main house because its security was thicker, its walls older, its loyalties easier to count. I wanted a locked room and 10 consecutive hours without someone trying to poison, shoot, or psychologically reorganize me. Neither of us got what we wanted. Rosa had sent up dinner untouched. Gianni was in the corridor outside my room explaining to Marco why tactical snacking was not a moral failure. I opened the note because it carried my father's handwriting. Mercy, help me. Chapel vestibule, please. My stomach turned over. I knew it could be false. I knew my father had never once earned the speed with which I grabbed my coat. I knew all of it. Trauma does not care what you know. It cares what it can still command. By the time I realized the hallway guard outside my door had been changed, it was too late. The man turned. Not Marco. Not Gianni. One of Vittorio's. A cloth hit my mouth. The world tipped sideways. The last thing I heard before blackness was the dry, furious click of onyx beads somewhere very far away. I woke in a church vestibule. Of course I did. Stone floor, draft under the doors, candles guttering in red cups before a cracked plaster saint. My wrists were tied in front of me, which meant the man responsible wanted me able to pray. Vittorio leaned against the opposite wall in a beautifully cut coat and watched me come back to myself with open satisfaction. I dislike chloroform theatrics, he said. They cheapen the century. But urgency does ruin standards. I forced air into my lungs. You killed Paolo. Yes. You poisoned Dante. Yes. The bluntness of it made my skin crawl. And Lucia, his smile altered by a fraction. Ah, he said, there you are. I wanted to spit at him. I wanted to be calm. I managed neither. You leaked the root. I refined a lesson. My whole body went cold. She was 11. She was leverage, he corrected. Your mistake, Alina, is thinking families like ours are built by love. They are built by surviving the price of obedience. The chapel door boomed open. Dante came in like judgment. Marco on one side, Gianni on the other, 2 more men behind them, guns drawn. Beads wound tight around Dante's left hand, hard enough to cut. Vittorio did not look surprised. That was quick, he said. Dante's gaze went to my bound wrists first, only then to Vittorio. It should not have mattered. It mattered more than anything. Let her go, Dante said. Vittorio laughed softly. You still ask as though I'm beneath disappointing you. Let her go. This time the words were not a request. Vittorio glanced at me. Do you want to know what your lovely wife said when she realized I'd moved too soon? Something changed in Dante's face, just enough. Vittorio smiled wider. She said, and I quote, "You stupid bastard, now he'll stop hesitating." The room rearranged around that sentence. Bianca had known. Bianca had tried. Bianca had bought time with public cruelty because private truth would have killed faster. Vittorio sighed. Honestly, marriage is wasted on all of you. He put the gun to my head. Marco moved. Dante's hand came up sharply, stopping him. The silence that followed was so total I could hear my own pulse in my teeth. Choose, Vittorio said pleasantly. Old loyalty or new weakness? Dante looked at me, not at the gun, at me. In his eyes was everything he had never said aloud because saying it in public, in family, in blood, turned love into a target. So he did not say it. He chose in the language he trusted. He dropped the beads. For half a second, everyone in the room looked down at the black onyx scattering across stone. That was all Gianni needed. He slammed a brass candle stand into the wrist holding the gun. Marco fired once. I hit the floor as Vittorio swore. Dante crossed the space between us with terrifying speed and got to me before I finished falling. One arm around my shoulders, the other drawing me behind him, while bullets cracked through plaster saints and candle smoke filled the vestibule like a second weather. Are you hit? No. Stay down. He shoved his own body between mine and the open nave while Marco and the others returned fire. Gianni, flat on the floor beside me, hissed, I knew church would kill me. I said that once. This is not the time, I whispered. It is absolutely the time. Across the vestibule, Vittorio staggered back against the confessional, blood bright on his sleeve, yet he was still smiling. He looked at Dante over the smoke and said the words that finally split the past open. I told your father years ago that leaving children unattended near war teaches everyone the correct scale of consequence. Dante went still in a way I had learned to fear. Not because it meant hesitation, because it meant the end of it. He rose. Marco said his name once. Dante did not seem to hear. Vittorio tried to raise the gun again. He did not get the chance. Dante shot him once in the chest, then again, then crossed the distance and stood over the man who had made a lesson out of a child's death. Vittorio coughed blood onto the church tiles and laughed once wetly. There, he whispered. Finally! Dante aimed at his forehead. I thought absurdly of sugar cooling under the wrong hand. Of mothers on kitchen floors, of 11-year-old girls in blue dresses, of all the moments that remade a life before you knew they had started. Dante, I said. He did not lower the gun. I pushed to my feet anyway, rope still biting my wrists, and put my hand over his. His whole body locked, not from rage, from the touch. Don't give him the last lesson, I whispered. The church held its breath. For one terrible second, I thought he would do it anyway. Then his eyes came to mine, and the gun lowered by an inch. 2. Marco stepped forward and took it from his hand. Vittorio was still alive when the sirens started in the distance. He looked up at Dante with blood in his teeth and said, almost fondly, "Too late, cousin. You chose her the first night you said nothing." Then he died. Chapter 12, What Silence Means the Hospital Wanted Statements. The police wanted a version of the truth that could fit in ordinary paperwork. The newspapers, by morning, would want scandal dressed as society tragedy. None of them got me. Dante took me home before dawn, not to the river house, not to my apartment. To the Manhattan palazzo with the chapel wing and the east windows, and the kitchen where I had once made blood-orange torte under armed observation. The house opened for us in silence. Rosa cried when she saw me and pretended she had something in her eye. Marco took over the downstairs security rotation without being asked. Gianni insisted his heroism had gone wildly underappreciated, and then nearly passed out when Meyerla kissed his cheek in the scullery and told him not to die before breakfast. "I'm going to live forever now," he whispered to me reverently as I passed. "You were always impossible." "Yes," he said. "But now I'm validated." Upstairs, the sky beyond the windows had just begun to pale. Dante took me not to the east suite but to his study. The room was dim except for the fire and the low lamp by the desk. Lucia's beads had been restrung. I knew because they lay coiled beside a crystal glass, no longer broken across church stone. He closed the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "Bianca was trying to protect me." "Yes. She used cruelty because it was safer to be hated than overheard." "Yes." I folded my arms around myself. "Are you going to tell her that?" His gaze lowered briefly. "I already did." I stared. "When?" "While you were giving a statement." A beat. "I ended the marriage." The words landed quietly. Not like triumph, like a structure finally admitting it had been hollow for years. She took it well. A shadow of exhausted humor touched his face. "Bianca has been waiting 18 months for me to say the truth out loud. She called me slow." That startled a laugh out of me before grief could stop it. His eyes warmed by a fraction at the sound. Then he crossed the room and stopped in front of me with that same dangerous care he used when every movement cost him something. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "About Vittorio. About Lucia's route, about why silence mattered. Maybe. I am not good at maybe." "No," I said softly. "You're good at control. And you," he said, "are good at walking toward blood with your hands open." Neither of us smiled. Some truths came out too tired for theater. I looked at the beads on the desk. "He said you chose me the first night you said nothing." Dante's jaw shifted once. "That was the first night I understood that speaking your name in public would put a target where I could not stand over it." His voice dropped lower. "Silence is not absence where I come from, Alina. Sometimes it is the only way a promise survives the room." The use of my name undid something in me, because he almost never used it. Mercy was what he called the part of me that endangered itself for strangers. Alina was the part he had looked at anyway. I stepped closer without meaning to. "What was the promise?" I asked. His hand rose, touched the side of my neck, barely there. "That no one would touch you again and live to enjoy it." The brutal honesty of that should have frightened me. Instead I said, "That's not the whole one." His thumb moved once against my skin. No beads clicked. No gun waited. No corridor listened. When he spoke again, the words were roughened by the effort of having been withheld too long. "The whole one," Dante said, "was that if you ever walked out of danger alive, I would open the door myself even if it ruined me." I forgot how to breathe for a second. Because this was how he loved, like a locked thing finally admitting it had a hinge. "I don't want you ruined," I whispered. A dark, almost broken smile touched his mouth. "Mercy, that was never in your control." Then he kissed me, not like the chapel, not like restraint worshipped for its own sake. This was hunger that had survived discipline and come back changed by it. One hand at my neck, the other at my waist, drawing me in with terrible gentleness as if he still expected me to vanish if he held too hard. I tasted smoke, winter, exhaustion, and the man himself at last, controlled nowhere now except where it mattered most, where he kept making room for me to stop. I didn't. My hands found his shirt, his shoulders, the scar at the base of his throat by accident, and then not by accident at all. His breath broke. That small sound did more damage than any speech could have. When we finally pulled apart, the room had changed scale. So had I. He pressed his forehead to mine. 30 days, he said. I almost laughed from sheer disbelief. Now, yes, his voice was quiet again, dangerous in a different way. Because if you stay after 30 days, I want it to be because you chose with full knowledge of what I am. I looked at the firelight catching on Lucia's beads. At the man who had carried a dead child through 17 years of guilt and still learned, somehow, to lower a gun when I asked. At the silence between us that no longer felt empty. What if I choose sooner? I asked. His eyes lifted to mine. The answer in them was devastating. Then, Dante said, I spend the rest of my life proving you were not wrong. A knock sounded once at the study door. Marco's voice came through, dry as ash. Boss. Bianca sent files from Paolo's locker. Also, Gianni would like it noted for the record that he disarmed a traitor with ecclesiastical equipment. From the other side of the hall, Gianni called, History matters. Marco, I laughed against Dante's mouth before he kissed me again. Outside, dawn was beginning over a city built on appetite and debt. Inside, the war was not over. But neither was I, and this time, when everything chose for us, I chose back.